Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders, a safe space for women to thrive in community where their voices and stories are heard. We're a sisterhood supporting each other to live our dreams and embody the sacred feminine to restore balance on our planet. Join us each week as we return to the unconditional love and guidance of our heart and our womb. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I invite you to walk this path of beauty, devotion, and service with us. This podcast with Richard has been a long time coming. I'm so excited to share it with you today. Ever since I was a kid, I loved looking at the stars and learning about astronomy and asking questions like, why are we here? Where do we come from? What's the point of all this? And so many of these questions have begun to be answered through my study of Vedic Astrology with Richard. It's the ancient form of astrology from India, and he's going to tell us all about the difference between Western astrology, Eastern astrology. We usually have a different sign in Vedic or Eastern astrology, and it tends to be so accurate in terms of learning about our phases of life and some of our Dharma in this life. Our charts are literally a karmic printout of what we're here to do and learn and explore. So I'm excited to share this wisdom with you today. And I also wanted to let you know Richard is a guest teacher in the women's initiation program that I lead, The Way of the Priestess. We are opening up enrollment right now and beginning a new cohort March 22nd, 2024. So if you've been feeling called to this path of devotion, beauty, and service, I would love to connect with you. Just visit risingwomanleaders.com to download the program guide and learn more. This is a year and a day mystery school training program. If you are drawn to the path of the priestess, chances are you have walked this path for many lifetimes. For some, a priestess serves as a space holder, a leader of a movement, one who is highest service to the greater whole. But an even more simple definition is one who serves as a vessel of the divine and chooses to live in embodiment of divine love. This program will guide you through a series of rituals and initiations, marking entrance into a new way of being. And at the end of the program, we hold space for this rite of passage, a vows ceremony, where you get to write your own vows to yourself, to your community, to all the ways you feel called to show up and serve in this life. We'll join together to reveal a deeper meaning of existence, anchor into our living embodiment of love to serve our planet and future generations. Every month is a different goddess, guide, archetype energies where you get to learn more about and also participate in ritual related to the high holy days of the year, the equinoxes and the solstices and all the cross-quarter holidays in between. We'll be exploring core values of femininity, devotion, wildness, compassion, boundaries, prosperity, service, love, leadership, and vision. Each month includes the Priestess curriculum, twice monthly live sisterhood video calls, goddess wisdom and guided journeys, facilitation skills, high holy day wisdom, recommended reading, priestess rituals, a private WhatsApp group, an accountability sister, new and full moon wisdom, as well as guest teacher videos. We also offer need-based scholarships, as well as a few spaces for partial scholarships for women of color. Find out more by visiting risingwomanleaders.com, download the guide, and you'll have the link to book a call with me to learn more right there. Visit the website to learn more, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Hi, everyone. I'm here today with a dear friend who is also a Vedic astrologer and an Ayurvedic doctor, Richard Powell. Thanks for being here, Richard.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly my honor.
Yeah. So I have Richard as a guest teacher on my Way of the Priestess program every year. And I usually have you come on pretty early on in the program to kind of lay a foundation of how we can talk about like the phase of life we're going through and what might be happening in the stars. And I always offer new and full moon wisdom, and I share both a perspective of, okay, here's what all the Western astrologers are saying. And then here's also a Vedic astrology perspective of where the moon is and what's happening in the sky. Um, so I think it was a little bit before the pandemic, maybe a few years before that, when I think it was our mutual friend Karen let me know that there's this thing, Vedic astrology, comes from India, the East, and that we tend to have a different sign in this form of astrology. And I thought that was really interesting and had my session with you. So I went from being a Pisces to a Libra. And I wonder if you can just start with that. You know, what was your introduction to this form of astrology? How did you get into it? And then we can kind of talk about the differences with Western and Eastern
Yeah,
astrology.
that's a really good question. Um, I should start off by saying is that I never intended on becoming a Vedic astrologer or an astrologer of any type for that matter. Um, and so yet here I am, fully convinced, so I'll share all of that with you. Um, and so it's interesting. I think growing up, I was like a lot of people, you know, different books on astrology, you find it all very interesting. And for me, I tend to be, yes, a very spiritual and intuitive person, but also a really analytical person. And so there's always something about it that even if I read it, I don't know, it just never fully grabbed me for one reason or another. And I remember when I went to study with Dr. Vasant Lad, who I began my Ayurvedic studies with, it involved a class on Vedic astrology. And that led to me having a consultation with that teacher because I like trying new things, even if I tend to be a little skeptical. And suffice it to say that my mind was completely blown. I mean, the specificity of that reading was unlike anything I'd ever read before. It wasn't just like, oh, you know, you should work on opening your heart or you need to speak your voice more, which are wonderful things, but they're kind of more general truths. It was hyper specific of exact dates of when things happened and what the lessons were and what the exact relationship was up to my mother or my father. Um, the specific realm of life that my sole purpose was in. And eventually, unfortunately, at that time, it also included like when a relationship would end, and it was like months down the road. Um, and it just put me into a place where I thought, I cannot deny what I just experienced. Um, and it was actually super helpful. And when a number of these things came to pass, I decided that because of my curious mind that I wanted to study it. But even when I started to study it, it wasn't from the perspective of, oh, I want to do this. It was just something that I became very interested in because I found it to be immensely accurate. And, you know, as time moves on, you um, grow in a science. I read a number of books and I read those number of books again. And then I would start doing readings for friends. And then eventually they refer somebody to me. And then I start officially studying under people. And the whole process for me was just one big, beautiful, pleasant snowball of grace in ways that this divine science found me. And so here we are now, more than a decade later. And I still love it. I'm still blown away by it. I still study with several of my teachers, and I'm still growing, and I still am left in awe of the beauty of the world that we can predict anything, let alone some very specific things. And so, because I witnessed it, you know, help me experience that, and because I could continually see it give insight to others, I realized that there's something very special about this science, you know, that it has this uncanny ability to help us in perhaps when we need it most.
Mm. Yeah, as you were studying, did you find things about your chart that would make it prime for being an astrologer? Did you find that too in your own chart as you started to
Oh my
study?
gosh, did I ever? That and more. So, yeah, there are a number of things there. I have a lot of spiritual type, even like renunciate like combinations in my chart. Um, and in the Vedas, in Vedic literature, we often speak of what's called the Purush Artha, the four aims of life. And it sort of shows which area of life is your main focus. And for those listening who may not know them, some of these words you'll be familiar with. So Dharma is the first one. That's actually a very difficult word to translate. But I've worked at my own translation that I think is quite accurate. Is Dharma is action in the world that creates peace, health, and abundance for all life on Earth and the Earth itself. Um, Clearly, we don't have a lot of that right now. The second one is Artha, which is earning of a living, and earning of all the things that support us. It could be family, food, money, especially in our current age. Obviously, we have lots of that one. Then we have Kama, desires. People might know this phrase from Kama Sutra. Like Kama just means desire. So, what do you desire in life? Clearly, we have a lot of that. So we're very Artha and Kama dominant. We desire to have more money, so we can have more money to get our desires, and this is our circle. But then the last one is Moksha. And when I learned that my life is mostly Dharma and Moksha based, I gained a fantastic insight into myself. And Moksha is all things removed from the world. It is retreat, it is contemplation, it's even foreign residences, it's ashrams, meditation, spiritual practice. And when I learned that my chart was dominantly a Dharma and Moksha chart, it was so helpful to me because for the first time, I had a lens through which to understand myself. Like, oh, this is why I don't fit in. And this is why
Mhm.
I don't fit into in a lot of ways into various groups. And so it helped me tremendously to realize that that's where my sole purpose is. And I know that one thing we've talked about a lot in the various courses we've done together is just that question, like, where is your sole purpose? And actually, the chart shows it quite clearly, what realm of life your sole purpose is in. And so for me, mine was in the 12th house. And it's that area that is removed from the world. So um, when I've done readings in ashrams and things, everyone's sun is up there in the 12th house. So,
Uh-huh.
which isn't the most profound statement when you're at an ashram to say, you should go to an ashram. Uh,
Yeah, we're
so it can be,
already so intuitively connected and guided. And that is something I often found in astrology readings. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm already doing that. Or,
right. Yeah. Because to an extent, it is interesting that um, I have found that it's impossible to not do what your chart shows you should be doing, but you could be doing it better.
mm,
That's the question. It's like you could be doing it better. And one of the great sort of, I don't want to say maybe error is the right word, but I suppose that one of the great errors is that because we just think there are a couple of aims of life, money, desires, career, all this stuff, that when life invariably puts us into something other than that, we think we failed or that we've gone astray or that we certainly made a mistake somewhere or something like that, right? But I suppose that's one of the beauties here is that we can look at someone's life and realize like, oh yeah, the reason why that other theme is hard for you because this other one over here is what you should be doing. And see, you're already kind of doing it. So good on you for listening to yourself. You were correct. But let's get you to step into that even more so that you can find more fulfillment and more happiness and more sense of ease without the stress and burden of thinking that we should be doing something else.
yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, in our Western culture, just that we are so focused on money, desires, passions,
Mm.
and there's more.
So much more.
Um,
So much more.
yeah. So let's dive into Eastern, Western, how they differ.
Mhm.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is a huge we could just talk about this for the rest of the time
Yeah.
here. I'll try to keep it concise, and also I want everyone to know too that um, I love both systems. I really do think they're beautiful, but obviously we practice what we prefer. So I prefer Vedic astrology because it resonates so much more with me, and the reason being is a few key reasons. One is that most people aren't aware that the Western system follows the tropical zodiac, which isn't doesn't reflect the current sky. Like where they say a certain constellation and say Cancer, it's not actually there. And it's kind of one of the reasons why an astronomer might kind of poke fun at astrology, like, oh, how could they be correct? It's not even the math is off anyways. Um, and so in that system that we're all more used to, it was accurate about 1800 and some years ago. But the sky moves a tiny little bit every single year. It's a little smidgen to where every 75 years the constellations move 1 degree out of 360. So one of the huge differences in these two systems is that in Vedic astrology, we use the exact math that an astronomer would use, or a scientist would use, or NASA would use, meaning that when we look up and we say, we can see Cancer and there's the moon. Oh, look at the beautiful moon in Cancer, because it's clearly 100% in Cancer. Whereas in the Western system, most of the time they would go, oh, the moon's in Leo, when actually in the sky in real time, there's nothing in Leo. So that's a really, really big difference. And where, people like myself who are very analytical because they have a strong Virgo placement, that more specific calculation of the math would is probably more appealing. And because of that, it's why we can get hyper specific and sometimes even predict the days that things can happen, which seems crazy to think, but it's really true. Um, Not just me, but Jyotishis in general, we often have the experience of predicting the day or week that something can happen or will happen, and it's because of the math. So that's one of the really, really big differences. Um, a few of the other smaller ones are that we have phases of life we're in. So we're always in like a major period. It's like an overarching umbrella that we're in. And then we're in a minor period. And boy, these periods have dramatically different flavors. You could be in a Jupiter period for 16 years. You could be running Saturn, for like a 17-year long stretch, or Venus for 20. And that drastically changes your experience, very much so. And one of the last areas is that unlike the Western system that was more solar based, with the 12 house system, Vedic astrology was originally more lunar based. So it was based around these smaller wedges of the sky called nakshatras or lunar constellations in English. And these are like these little smaller 27 wedges. And they're like embodiments of feminine Shakti, really, that we all live within. And so they offer a lot more nuance than 12 more broad things, which are very true. But on top of that, we also have these 27 very specific wedges of the sky with lots of Vedic myth and story to them that just gives you so much context for your life. So those are three of the main areas. And the result is that in our system, in Vedic astrology, you can be born any day and be considered any of the 12 signs. So it's fairly rarefied in that way.
Yes, because in Eastern astrology, we usually go by your rising sign, the lagna, the ascendant, as who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I remember you saying that that moment when we're born, the constellation on the eastern horizon is the one that has the most effect on us, like the biggest imprint in that moment of birth when we're so open and vulnerable to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often like to say it was the constellation that was being born as you were being born.
Yeah.
And but important to note that in the Western system, it's a different sign, right? So that's the difference. And that word lugna we use for it, we get so much more out of it. The word lugna in Sanskrit really means to begin a journey, to be adhered to something. And in Vedic philosophy, we teach that the soul comes in through the east and imparts its karma phala, or the fruit of its karma, across the landscape of the sky, that we experience here on Earth. So another great way to liken that is, like for example, you have blue sunglasses on and I have orange sunglasses on, and you look at the world and go, "Oh, the world is so blue," and I'd be, "No, it's not. It's so orange," and we'd both be fully correct. And that is that sign that's rising. It's like, yeah, they're like fancy designer celestial sunglasses that you can't take off.
Yeah, how we each see the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and one more thing I'll add about the moons, for example, we just had a Leo full moon in Western astrology. And
Mhm.
then when I actually look up, like, where's the moon in the sky? It's usually one sign before, which
Mhm.
was Cancer.
Mhm.
And not always, though. Once in a while, it's the same.
Every once in a while that happens. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we can all agree and have dinner together. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So before we dive into going through the signs and the planets, I want to go through all of them if we can.
Mhm.
Um, there's a place that you mentioned, a website that people can look up their chart to find out their rising sign, their lagna.
Correct.
So, so
Yeah.
what was that site?
Yes, that website is www.deva, DEVA, .guru, GURU. It's a fantastic website. And when you enter in all of your birth information, and yes, you need to have the exact minute, or you can do approximate, but minutes make a difference in the system. And when the chart pops up, you'll see this square with these little diamonds and triangles in it. And there's a lot there to discuss, but the simple thing is that there'll be a diamond in the top center. And in the bottom of that diamond, there'll be a number 1 through 12. And that number 1 through 12 correlates to the constellations Aries through Pisces. And we would say that that is your lugna, or quote, that's the sign you are. Now, it's not so simple as to say that's the only thing about you, but that's the foundation. There are other layers that come into.
Yeah, so helpful. So let's dive in. Should we do the 12 signs, a little like synopsis of each, and then we'll go into the planets?
Sure, yeah, yeah. So I want to I'll mention here that it's not as simple as you're just this one sign. Invariably, if we are in a class, and I know we probably have experienced this both, I'm sure, and someone goes, can you describe, we're going to start with Aries, and you describe Aries, and people will say, "Oh, yeah, that's true, but I'm also like, it's just one part." So there are a handful of signs that we are, each person is usually a combination of 2 to 3 signs, let alone the planets that impact them. So just as we go through this, if you are listening to this and you look up the sign that I'm telling you, like, no, it's just a third of your traits, but nonetheless, it's the foundation. So yeah, let's go through them, huh? So there are 12. And again, the numbers are 1 through 12. So number one is Aries. And by all means, I would love for you to chime in if there's something you want to say about each one, because I know you know them. Um, so Aries is ruled by Mars. So innately, Aries people will be like a little independent, a little sharp because they're ruled by Mars. Now, Aries symbol's a ram. Aries individuals tend to be very assertive and very quick. Oftentimes, when you see people who are race car drivers or just who move quickly, it's an Aries placement that they have. Um, all these signs, they have so many strengths and weaknesses, and so it's not like, oh, like it's not like the lotto, like did I win? You know, am I a Taurus or a Libra? Um, but on the strong side, Aries are very entrepreneurial. They're very assertive and they're naturally very intelligent. On the to grow side, they tend to lack stamina, like long-term stamina, and um, they can be overly assertive and they kind of like to argue. Um, you kind of one of the kind of Aries jokes is, that they um, don't realize that a lot of people will think that they're arguing with them and they're just like talking. They're just naturally so assertive they can't help it. So yeah, they need
Yeah.
to be balanced by more long-term energy. How can I focus my energy in the long term and maybe soften my edge a little bit and be patient and wait for others?
Yeah.
Number two is Taurus, ruled by Venus. Taurus symbols a bull. And one of the things I find so interesting about Taurus is it virtually always has a few traits with it. One is that they tend to be athletic. It's the bull. They tend to be physically strong. When you look at people that have Taurus placements, there's some use of the body, almost always. Um, Athletic, martial arts, dance, like, and not just like, oh, I did it for a little bit when I was growing up. Like, they tend to be fairly serious about it. Um, they also tend to be foodies. They love food, Taurus individuals. Um, and they tend to be really good at finance because it's the second sign, which is likened to the second house. So they tend to be better at money than the average person. They're quite stable. It's an earth sign. Um, and the fact that they're ruled by Venus, kind of like, we like some of the Venus signs more because they don't interfere with us with other people very much. So a Taurus person can kind of maybe bend too much um, for other people. But the Taurus thing is that they bend, 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 and then they snap, and then they become like the proverbial bull in the china shop. And you're like, whoa, who are you? Where'd the nice Venus person go? Um, so that's Taurus, the second sign,
Yeah. I
number
can think
two.
of some people in my life for both of them, and I'll give a couple examples. Like one Taurus friend I have is such a good cook, like loves food. Um, Definitely has some of that Venusian energy of like, yeah, making home and hearth. And
Mm,
also, when I've been on hikes with a Taurus, they're like up the mountain, like really just trudging through, and I'm just like,
so
ah,
strong.
so
It's
behind.
I'm a little envious of their endurance and their strength on it. Obviously, something can always change something, but they're typically very strong. Yeah.
And my dad is in Aries with the Mars in the first house. And when
Oh,
I
what about
discovered
that?
that, he's super goal oriented, like super on it. Like he's a physician, but then also he's like a mountain climber and like creates these like really big adventures and then like goes on them and completes them. And
Yeah, that energy. It's like really, I always admire Aries individuals because of the initiative they take. Like the word for Aries isn't
yeah.
like, oh, can you do this as soon as possible? It's like now, or maybe it was even like yesterday. You know,
Yes.
they don't wait for anything, and obviously that could be a problem, like anything, but
Yes.
it's also very admirable too.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So let's go to number three.
Number three, Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury individuals tend to have this forever young sort of look to their face. And like, which people tend to dislike when they're young, but then as they age, they're like, oh, I'm very glad I have this forever young thing going on. Its symbol is or are the twins. And so this factors into their life in many ways. They tend to be very playful. Gemini is hands down the most playful sign in the zodiac, and it's one of my favorite qualities of them. They're just so fun. They love fun, play, spontaneity, um, and because the symbol is the twins, they tend to, in some way, like really channel masculine and feminine energy. Like they can be, very attractive woman, very handsome man, whatever, but there'll be some slight touch where you go, oh wow, like they're really feeling and experiencing both in some way. It's really beautiful. Um, they're also innately philosophical. Ram Dass is a Vedic Gemini, for example, was, and when you listen to him talk, how analytical and philosophical he was, like that's a classic Gemini trait. Very able to debate because they can see both sides of things. Now, the strength is that they can see both sides of things. The weakness is that they can see both sides of things, and it can be very hard for them to choose. They are actually they're not great at it. Um, so they tend to be overwhelmed by choices because they see all the options and they can be kind of paralyzed um, by that. But wonderful sign, very intelligent, very playful, and yeah, they remind you not to take yourself so seriously,
Mm.
which is really
Yeah,
nice.
I think of my Gemini friends, like there's a lot about creativity and really good writers.
Great
Yeah.
writers, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because for the Gemini in the Vedas, um, it's fascinating because they tend to be very good at those sorts of things and even amazing artists. I have one good friend who realized sort of unknowingly that in college she was a fantastic painter. And her first painting sold for thousands of dollars, like this Baroque style painting. But for other reasons in the chart, the art tends not to work out for them in the long run. Even though they're really good at it, they tend to not do it. It's sort of interesting. Um, but very wonderful sign, an air sign, as one might suggest. They can be very dual-minded. Um, Number four is Cancer, ruled by the moon. It's our first water sign. And um, it's ruled by the moon. And so a lot of the things we think about Cancer natives are actually very true. They're just naturally very emotive. They have a very comprehensive emotional landscape. And because the moon changes a lot, they tend to have this, yeah, emotive dance where they are able to move through it all um, in a way that is really nice to see. Um, because the moon is the mother and is very nurturing, Cancer natives tend to either go into healing sort of arts or it could be art in general. Like they tend to do very well in arts or film or music because of just the way the moon is so gorgeous, right? We look at the moon when it goes outside. There's something very captivating about it. And because of that, they work very well with the public. Cancer natives work wonderfully with the public. And if there's a side for them to work on, it's like, boy, they can be sensitive. They can be very sensitive. They
Mhm.
feel so much, and then they react is the thing because they're feeling so much. So the Cancer native is really best advised to, yeah, find rhythm in their life and groundedness so that their intellect remains in charge, so that their emotions don't overrun who they are.
So this is my husband is a Cancer. So
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
think,
right.
yeah, very charismatic, great
Mhm.
at making friends and being social, and also just emotional waves, ups and downs. And so just giving it space when those emotions come up.